As far as the COVID-19 test, I've had a lot of doctors on recently, especially, Dr. Andrew Kaufman really went into detail by saying that, it tests for a tiny piece of RNA that could be in the system for a lot of different reasons, and therefore it can give a lot of false positives, and therefore he doesn't find that test to be very accurate. That's one thing to discuss. The second thing to discuss is that people are being diagnosed with COVID-19 because of COVID-19 symptoms, and oftentimes also the autopsy is giving that as a reason for death when we know of the comorbidities and other issues. So maybe we start with the first one, with the actual test itself, because I'm curious what you think and what the panel thinks.
Well, the studies have shown clearly, they go back a number of years, 2018, a CAT study that showed positive for COVID-19 for coronavirus, even though there was no exposure to coronavirus. Why? Because of the vaccine schedules. If they'd had a trivalent or covalent flu shot, cats that had this flu shot were testing positive. But my question is, we know there's a lot of things in these vaccines that have been injected into our bodies that we weren't aware of, like the glyphosates, for example. So is it possible that we had other aspects injected into our bodies without us knowing about it? And when you go all the way back to even 1984, the people with the studies that were done in mice and various studies that have been done that have been attributed to this false positive, like a 37% false positive for the COVID-19, it actually isn't a false positive. I believe that it is testing and it is picking up something that has previously been injected in our bodies. But the bottom line is, as Dr. Kaufman had said, we're testing for a very small particle of DNA, RNA. And if you amplify this enough, you'll have 100% of the population that'll test positive. You know what I'm saying? So it's the incidence. If you said that 1 out of every 100,000 cells is abnormal, but then you said, let me just change that criteria. If you have 1 out of 100,000 cells that are abnormal, then you're going to have disease X. But then we change the criteria and we say, well, let's go to 1 out of every million. Well, now you're going to have a decrease in the incidence of that disease because you're going to have diluted it. But if you amplify it and say, well, let's just say instead of 1 out of every 100,000, let's say 1 out of every 10,000 because you've just amplified it more. 1 out of every 1,000 or 1 out of every 100, then of course it's going to seem like the disease is very prevalent, but that's because you've changed the amplification of the analysis. And so if this is a certain component of the RNA or DNA, remember we're made up of various cells. If we start saying how many cells in our body are, or how much tissue in our body is, I'm trying to come up with a good example. If we're testing for the amount of cells in our body that are consistent with our nails, you're going to have a relatively small ratio. But if you start saying, okay, let's look at the cells that are consistent with skin, very, very specific for skin, you're going to have a much greater component that you're going to show positive for. And if you just start going for, let's look for every cell that has a nucleus and a cell membrane, then you're going to have 100%. So it all depends what you're looking at. And so the RNA fragments that they're looking at, they're going smaller and smaller and smaller. And when you amplify it, it's just going to start showing a higher and higher incidence. So that's what the bottom line comes down to.
Okay, so I think the question to the panel is, do they believe that the COVID-19 test, what inaccurately represents people that are actually, that actually have the coronavirus? What's the best way to phrase that question, Doctor?
Well, I think that probably we should say, how many people believe that the coronavirus has spread throughout the world, and probably everybody's going to test positive for it based upon how virulent and how fast it spread. My belief is it's already the whole planet already has it. So pretty much everybody's going to test positive. And when they say it's false positive, it's not false positive. It's just a positive. But it doesn't mean that we're sick. I mean, if you test for coronavirus is everywhere and has been. It's been over the whole planet since the 1960s. So, it's not checking for enough specificity of pathology. It's just checking for a general component. But even like people that have never been exposed and animal models that have never been exposed are testing positive, which tells me that everybody that has ever had any type of a flu shot probably is already going to test positive. Okay, so I'm not sure how to phrase that.
What if that question was this? How many people believe that if you test positive for COVID-19, that does not mean that you have a virus? Is that the question? Or is that, because the point is that a lot of people have said that you're going to test positive because you might have some of this RNA floating around your body, which you're saying we all could have for a variety of reasons. So how many believe a positive test on COVID-19 does not necessarily, mean?
Well, Brian, before we ask that question, let's ask a different question that'll maybe fine tune it. Let's ask this question. How many people believe the numbers that are being reported for COVID-19 deaths are factual? Let's start there.
Okay.
Is that a fair question,
yes,
Brian?
Yes, that is. Let's do that. How many believe that they are factual? As in okay, let's just look at that. And let's just quickly scroll through here.
I'm just seeing people shaking their head no.
Yeah, there's nobody saying yes. I mean, that's a general question. There's no one saying yes. So they're not factual. Okay. All right. We'll do a quick scroll through here.
I don't see anybody that's raised their hand yes that they believe that it's factual. So then the next question is, how many doctors, and this is the population that we really need to know from, right? How many doctors have experienced where dying with COVID-19 versus dying from COVID-19, those are two drastically different things. So we know that there have been people that have had their death certificates altered or have come into the hospital for some other issue and have had a diagnosis after death that converted. The death certificate's been changed to say COVID-19, even though it wasn't COVID-19. I have a friend whose neighbor's son committed suicide about 2 weeks ago. I think I shared this with you, Brian, off the air. And the cause of his death was listed as COVID-19. Candace Owens asked for the governor of Connecticut to resign and also asked for criminal sanctions to be brought against him because he falsely stated that a child had died of COVID-19, whereas in fact the child died of suffocation from the caretaker who admitted that it was her suffocation that caused the child to die. But again, these false narratives attributing death to COVID-19 when in fact it's not COVID-19. And now the memes are out there. Somebody fell out of a plane without a parachute that died of COVID-19. You got shot in the head, you died of COVID-19. You got in a car wreck, you died of COVID-19. So how many doctors have either experienced or seen this altercation or have been asked to change the death certificates or have been, I know I received a medical board letter saying that don't even test people. If you think that they could have it, just list it. So I know that I've received that. So how many doctors feel that the numbers of deaths being reported from COVID-19 are being altered or inflated?
Okay, so raise your hand if you think they're being inflated. Okay, if you just keep your hands up, just want to try to get a scroll through here.
There's a Dr. Christine Demalo, I can't say her name. She's got glasses on. I haven't seen you raise your hand or at all. So if you're raising your hand, we can't see it or decreasing it. So can you turn the camera so we can see? Your hand is up or? Oh, okay. So her hand is up. So I've been counting her as a no vote because I couldn't see her hand this whole time.
Okay, gotcha.
Yeah.
All right. So
you may want to bring your other hand up, or because I think the hand you're raising up, we can't see it.
Okay. All right. So that's a pretty much consensus on both of those things, that things are being overreported and misreported. Is there any final question we want to ask about that?